I would put One Cent Thief and I would put Kahar and I would put Sheriff, the things that we're building now. They're as good as anything you'll find on Netflix. In fact, once we've exhausted them on the Astro platform, we actually then sell them to Netflix and they take the top 10 places.
So why? Why is it that the government isn't making the moves to actually rival the likes of Korea? Good morning and welcome to the Breakfast Grille. I'm Philip C. Now, today's guest helms a business that is in most households in Malaysia, but has been encountering, to say the least, turbulent times. Euan Smith, CEO of Astro Holdings India Berhad, is in the studio. Welcome, sir.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Well, let's just talk a bit about your career in Astro. You joined Astro, correct me if I'm wrong, in 2020?
I did, right in the middle of COVID. So I spent the first 3 months trying to understand Astro from a kitchen table in the UK.
Right. And when you joined, I mean, the business is fundamentally very different from where it is today. I mean, if you look at 2020 revenue, it's about 5 billion ringgit. Now it's at 3.4 billion. Profit after tax at that time, nearly 700 million ringgit. Now 37 million ringgit. Profit margins close to zero. To be exact, 0.1%. What happened?
So I think, the global, we're no different to the rest of the global pay TV industry. I think if you look, the legacy operation for a pay TV platform was extremely good when you were adding customers. You have a very high fixed legacy cost base. One is content, but then clearly satellites cost an extreme amount of money, and then you have a huge amount of kind of like technical installers, contact centers, etc. And that was the old model, and it was a very high fixed cost. And when times were good in the 2000s, as you were adding subscribers, once you got to a certain level, every subscriber was pretty coming on at a really good profit number. Obviously, as you change that, now that we've seen the rise of global OTTs and we've seen different technologies come in particular the move away from kind of like linear and satellite onto streaming and on demand, you've seen a complete shift in the market. And in common with each one of the pay TV companies around the world, MultiChoice South Africa, Foxtel Australia, Sky New Zealand, we're no different to those guys. We're no different to the big boys like the Comcasts. We are in a transition phase, which is to move ourselves out of that legacy cost satellite structure,
right,
and embrace the streaming world, which is things like Sukkah, things like Astro Fiber. It's to make ourselves continue to be relevant whilst focusing still on the thing that we know we do best, which is make great content.
Some would argue that decline of the existing business, the cash cow, right, and really it is the victim of so much disruption that took place, was actually inevitable, that people saw it much earlier, in the 2017s, 2016s, right? Was Astro at that time, in your view, when you came in, too late in actually addressing the disruption?
So I don't know it's a matter of too late. I think certainly if you look at where I was in Germany, so Sky Go, we were launching Sky Go and launching OTT services back in 2011, 2012. They were doing Now TV in the UK about that time. Foxtel was a bit later than that, so they had a thing called Presto, a product that they launched 2017. It wasn't particularly successful because I think it was too early actually, and it wasn't until 2018, 2019 they launched KO and Binge. So we're certainly behind the curve compared to some of our more westernized competitors, sister companies rather, or other pay TV operators. But it doesn't matter when you start. The answer is when you start is to get going and to get done. And I'm really pleased with what we've managed to achieve in the period that I've been here, because we have effectively moved from a single pay TV based on a dish and a set-top box proposition. We've really moved into embrace a whole new range of services. So the thing that you have on the desk here, Sukkah, which is our OTT equivalent version, is now really managing to drive and take off compared to where we were, say, even 2 years ago.
So let's talk about the changes you've put in place, right? Clearly, there's a horizontal development where you've actually, offered complementary products to the viewing public from just only the classic pay TV, but you've also got Enjoy and Sukkah.
We have.
Right? So that's one dimension of growth. You've also kind of accelerated the development of the content creation through your Astro Studios, and you've also built downstream, driving the fiber development across the board, right? Of these bets, which are the most important bets for you?
So I think the biggest bet is to move people from legacy pay TV into the OTT streaming world. Whether that's being done through a set-top box, which is why we have the new plug-and-play set-top box, or whether it's through Sucker, whether that's on an app or it's through the stick, that the whole move is to move people away from legacy satellite-based and high cost, is to move into something that's cheaper in terms of distribution and delivery.
Right.
That's the first thing.
Yeah, but the risk will be that there'll be dilution and cannibalization, isn't it? That is going to be your core base that will walk down and actually buy the cheaper products. Is that the risk you have factored in?
So for sure, but if you don't eat your lunch, someone will eat your lunch for you.
So you accept the cannibalization will happen. And
so we do. We accept cannibalization, and the reason that the process that we're going through is to strip the cost out of the platform.
Right.
Hugely strip the cost out of the platform. The operating costs come down about 50% during the time I've been here. And why is that? It's so that we can do two things. We can put more of our money into content, into making the stuff which differentiates us. And the second thing that it enables us to do is then get to better price points in the market. So that's why Astro One's just launched, for example. So, when I arrived, we had this plethora of, packages and add-ons and all this kind of...
It was very confusing.
It was confusing, but all pay TV was confusing, right?
Yeah.
And now effectively, there's three things you can buy. You can buy entertainment for 49 ringgit, you can buy entertainment plus sports for 99 ringgit, or you can get an everything you can ever want to eat, the Epic pack, which is every app you could ever want to have. And so that's the key thing, which is to make it super simple and to drive more value. So in those packs because we've been taking the cost out, in those packs compared to, say, 2 years ago, you'll find significantly improved value.
So the end state really is it's going to be a smaller business, but effectively you're going to drive margin. You're going to be growing the profit margin more, right? Because you're focusing on bringing down the cost because naturally the customer isn't just going to pay a lot more.
Yes.
Right.
We're driving that, but also we're moving into adjacent businesses. You cannot be a single play in this environment anymore, which is why Astro Fiber. Because it's a natural sort of vertical that's alongside. Once you've got the pay TV and you've got your on-demand product, to be able to bundle fiber in with that, we can do that at a really competitive price point. And then the next thing that we can do is, because we have such high distribution, is we can then use the addressable advertising engine that we've built over the last couple of years to really understand and drive touch points for advertising that go across all the various digital points, whether it's linear, on demand, but also then use our radio machine so that we can also extend that into radio and to digital. I think it's one of the great secrets in this country that we are the biggest digital publisher in this country. We have 41 websites. We are the single biggest place, but because they're all spread out, whether it's Astro Awani or it's Stadium Astro or it's any of the new ID Active sites like Masculin, you don't really see it all as one. And one of the things that we need to do is to build that digital powerhouse going forward so that it's another revenue stream for us.
So many moving engines that you're driving forward, right? Is there a concern on focus?
We talk about that a lot. We talk about that strategy day. I think there are things that we are looking at that we're putting a toe in the water that are things like, for example, gaming or stepping into insurance and things. We've taken a conscious decision to not have those as kind of like incubator projects.
Right.
But fundamentally, the key things that we're trying to do, the key pillars are Sucker, addressable advertising, fiber, and as you called out as well, Astro Studios. So some of the things that we're doing at the moment with Astro Studios is to help pull more demand, help pull more volume in, and again, we're effectively trying to create 4 or 5 revenue paths where there used to be one.
Yeah, if I reflect back on the point that you joined the business, I would argue that actually you had a crisis in your hand where you had to turn around and effectively make the business survive, because really it was really, if you look at the ARPUs for pay TV, it was really on structural decline, and you really had to move all these different engines moving very fast. The question is, can they move fast enough to actually cover the declines or the inevitable cash cow?
Well, I think we're proving that they can. So last quarter, for example, as I was talking about on the IR call, last quarter, this business grew customers net across the various products that we had. Now, we haven't done that for 6 years. So the decline in the pay TV subs is a trickle compared to where it was. because we've added more value, because we've added lower price points. The growth of Sukha, it's very hard to market in this country. It's very hard to get awareness in this country. But the growth of Sukha is now doing what we expect. It's doing what I would expect from other places that I've worked, Foxtel, etc. Add that to Enjoy, and we're actually now growing customers again, which is a fantastic position.
But not revenue, though, to be honest. There is a customer base,
no, because
but the revenue isn't moving fast enough.
You've seen our results. It's at the expense of some ARPU.
Yeah,
absolutely,
it is.
But the idea is if you're growing customers again, then you have a broader distribution base at which you can actually drive advertising.
Yeah, and so look, we expect there is going to be this reset that has to take place, and it is important. But shareholders don't even buy the story about what it's going to be like in the future, right? We see where the stock is; it's down 40% year to date, 81% since you were in 2020. So when will shareholders buy the narrative and the strategy that you are proposing here?
Well, I think if you read the broker reports are very positive on the things that we're very positive on, which is grow adjacent revenue streams and effectively differentiate through our fantastic local content. And they're very bullish on that. But there's been a series of things that we've had to do over the course of the last 2 years, which have, for example, we've had to impair the company a couple of times over the course of the last 2 years, which clearly means that we can't pay dividend, which clearly has a knock-on to shareholder sentiment. We're hopefully accelerating our way out of that. As I say, we're now hoping that we're starting to turn the corner to actually be driving that business and giving our shareholders some value. But there's other things in the mix that, are, to be honest, are a bit of an anchor on the trajectory of the business. There's some things happening in government and regulatory land, which for ill reasons, as far as we're concerned, actually give us quite a headache in terms of weakening the overall trajectory that Astro and indeed the whole media business in the country is on.
All right. And if you reflect back on your role, you come in, you saw this disruption taking place, and I think the reality is, I think every industry goes through disruption.
Sure.
In your view, what is the next disruption that you think Astro has to contend with, that it has to be ready for?
So the shift in the creator economy. So there used to be a lot of gatekeepers, shall we say, for making content. And I think over time, user-generated content on YouTube, and anyone can pick up an iPhone now and make their own content, but it was always fairly average quality. I think that as AI develops now, if you see things like, I was playing with VO2 from Google at the weekend, we're approaching the stage now where anybody can be their own film producer, and we've got to get ourselves so that we are able to embrace the change and be part of that change rather than still live in the old model for how content got made and got generated. So we have a raft of AI, machine learning type projects inside the business. At the end of the day, it'll still be a great storytelling. I don't think great storytelling changes. I think that's still humans and has the human dynamic, etc., etc. But the way that production gets done definitely is going to change.
Lightning and the thunder, 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 feel the thunder. Lightning and the thunder, thunder. Malaysia's #1 5G network with you mobile.
Let's just talk a bit about competition. 80% of your content viewed is vernacular.
Absolutely.
So are you worried more about the OTTs that have the global streaming, or more the free-to-air channels which have more local content?
So we make about just over 10,000 hours of content ourselves every single year, 49 channels, and obviously all the assets and the on-demand that goes with that. So I think by one metric, we account for 38% of the GDP of this industry, which is huge. Yeah, and it's a privilege to be able to actually deliver that. Yeah. I see the OTTs, the global OTTs and the regional OTTs, the people like View as well as the Netflixes, etc. I see them as kind of frenemies, because for sure they are competing in the same pool as us for great content, but they're on our platform. they're part of our service, where we used to have channels and the channels would come from Disney or Eurosport or wherever it happened to be. Now we have apps on our platform and the apps come from wherever they happen to be. We're happy to be a broad church that aggregates and integrates all of these people. So I think the OTTs, it's going to be a long time before they've all dabbled in making local Bahasa content, but they came in with some checks in the early days, 2021, 2022. They turned a lot of production houses' heads, but the second check never arrived, or the third check never arrived, and there's been a retrenchment by pretty much everybody in the industry over the course of the last 2 years. We are still making the same amount of content that ever we have. We are still using the same production houses. We are, if you want longevity as a production house, then Astro is the right place to be. And so as we've been changing the value model of our business, we've been, as contracts been coming up, we've been removing or reducing the amount of exposure we have to the Hollywood type operators. And instead putting that money back in local. And why? Because, as you've said, the vernacular stuff is the stuff that A, works, and B, we are uniquely good at.
But your differentiator is that you build that broad church, isn't it? That you can bring and house global content, you build the local content, and you bundle it together. And that is your differentiator that helps you command premium. Does that still hold? That
still holds. You have to add sports to that as well, because, Astro is home of sports in this country, and if you want sports, then you come to us. So that's kind of like the third pillar. But effectively, what we're about is local entertainment across all the vernaculars, whether that's Mandarin, Cantonese, Bahasa, obviously, and Tamil as well. Marry that with the best of the rest from the global OTTs and the other houses that do the content there. And then have a powerhouse of sports sat right in the middle. And you drive those three things together, and that's because the synergies mean that you've got an integrated platform that people will continue to be interested in.
But the success will have to be that local content has global appeal. That, I think, is necessary regardless of whatever happens. So the question will be whether or not the content that Malaysia creates, the local content, whether it is of that quality of par that you see in the likes of Korea, Thailand, and India, right? That is always the challenge here, that we can't just be what we call jago kampung. We can't just deal with our own home markets.
So I, in the corridors of power in the government and regulatory, I am a broken record on this subject.
Right.
So I spend a lot of time talking about Korea. Because Korea has really taken over from Hollywood as the next great place to make content. How do they achieve that? Effectively, there was a 12-year plan put in place, which had a whole lot of government interventions in it to make the environment favourable for people to actually invest in Korea. A series of milestones. Parasite would have been one of the milestones, etc., etc. Squid Game would have been another one of the milestones, etc., to really build Korea as a powerhouse for content. Before I arrived in Malaysia, I had never heard the word Malaysia as being a place you could make content.
Right. We had failed models. Pinewood
you had failed models,
yes.
And yet you arrive here, and the vibrancy and the innovation from the content creation team, not just myself, but the Media Prima guys as well, it's really great. And I think if you look back 5 years and go to now, I would put One Cent Thief, and I would put Kahar, and I would put Sheriff, the things that we're building now. And I put things like The Great Resonance that we're building, and some of the other titles that we're doing. They're as good as anything you'll find on Netflix. In fact, once we've exhausted them on the Astro platform, we actually then sell them to Netflix, and they take the top 10 places.
So why? Why is it that the government isn't making the moves to actually rival the likes of Korea?
So I think it just, I think that I don't think it's about the understanding. I think that when I talk to various regulatory teams and governments, I think everybody understands it, I think it's we need to get to a joined up machine. And the joined-up machine needs to tackle three things. The first thing it needs to tackle is piracy, because we're not anything like as strong on piracy in this country as many other places are, Philippines or Singapore or many of the Western countries. So the first thing is close down piracy. The second thing is then create a level playing field for the local companies, the Astros and the Media Primas and the RTMs, against the global OTTs. Because at the end of the day, I'm employing 3,000 people myself, and then a huge amount in the ecosystem beyond myself. The Western guys, they employ precisely no people in this country, and they pay no tax. and yet they are in our markets. The same would be true for the ad guys, the Googles and the Facebooks and the TikToks. They're in our market and they are stealing ad spend and ad share, and yet they're not actually contributing to society. So I think the second thing is to build a new plan, which is how do you create a level playing field, how you actually support and look after the local players to make sure they can build that out. That's what it took in Korea for Korea to be able to drive the model. And then the third thing is putting money into flying the flag. So putting Malaysia on the map in terms of the conferences and the quality of output, et cetera, A lot of our kids and our animation travel super well. And increasingly we're finding with things like Sheriff, which recently went to Indonesia, and 1 Cent Thief and the like, we're finding that some more of our more adult content is also traveling well. But you have to have a consistent, concerted plan from every government department.
And for you, it's not altruistic, right? I mean, there is a huge business consideration here. If you look at your cost structure, content contributes to nearly 30, you say up to 40% of your cost structure.
We're heading towards 40% of our cost structure.
And that's incredibly high. And I presumably when you drive more local content, you reduce your Forex exposure, you actually bring down the unit cost of the cost, right?
100%.
Of content.
Exactly that. You've hit the nail on the head. That is the model. That's why we're driving heavily into local content, making more of it.
And when you think about cost structure, if you break down the cost structure, there's been quite a big shift in marketing spend, right? Quite a lot more, because you've been trying to introduce all these new products, right? Your Astro Packs, Enjoy, and also Suka. At what point will you stabilize your marketing costs, right? So that we can actually really see the price margin discovery that we should see.
So look, if you walk around the halls of Bukit Jalil, the Astro campus, I hope everybody will give you the same message, which is I only want to spend money on three things: content, product, marketing. Everything else is a ringgit that I don't really want to spend money on. So we've been driving to be able to up the amount of money that we spend on content, product and marketing. Why? Because those are our differentiators. The marketing aspect on that is really important, because unless people know it's there, it's really hard to get the viewership and get the engagement, and then you can't drive the ad dollar. So marketing was really under spec'd as an amount of money when I arrived. I've probably doubled the amount of marketing that we spend. I'd like to do more. If you go to a Sky or you go to some other players, they'll do 3x the kind of marketing spend that we do. We don't spend anything like as much as some of the key telcos in this market, for example. But I think marketing's pretty fundamental, because there's two ways that you can find content. You find it through great search and discovery. So we're pushing hard on doing that inside the app. But the other way you find it is because it's on billboards, or it's on word of mouth, or it's on your TikTok feed.
Yeah.
So I don't see us wanting to reduce the amount we spend on content and marketing. I think we'll flatline both those two things, hopefully. And the idea is to keep taking cost out of the back end of the business so that we can improve the profit margin headline.
So double clicking on these investments for these three things, right? Content, product, and marketing. Yeah. Going to buy more companies to.
So we're always looking. We took over a company that did post-production recently, and that was to fulfill out so we can do an end-to-end production suite. We have 3 or 4 irons in the fire, but it's not the right place on a radio show to be talking to you about who we're going to buy next. But there's 3 or 4 things that we're very interested in.
So not BFM?
Is that an option?
I'm not sure. It's whether or not there is a value proposition. How do you think about it?
So I do genuinely, without wanting to try and start a negotiation in this meeting, I do genuinely feel that we have Astro One is an extremely powerful brand, but it doesn't have a business radio. And that's one of the things that I've tasked Ash and Priya, who lead the teams. I've tasked them to have a proper look at. The same is true of a sports channel. I'm English, right? Talk Sport is huge. Five Live Sport is huge where I come from, and yet we haven't got that in this country, and I think we should.
On that note, let me drop that note, a DM. Let me slide that DM over to Malik Ali. Euan, thanks so much for joining us. Wishing you all the success in your endeavors for 2025. That was Euan Smith, CEO of Astro Holdings, Sdn Bhd. I'm Philip C., BFM 89.9.
Thanks for the time, Philip.